volunteering and fundraising activities to her research into recovering lost graves and family records, Bev's enduring devotion is not only an inspiration to others, her compassion has enhanced the lives of many in the GARVOC district community. Motivated by love of history, Bev has been instrumental in retrieving family records and unmarked graves that were destroyed in the 1983 fires. A long-standing member of the GARVOC Cemetery Trust, Bev dedicated a significant amount of her own time and effort delving into the archives to help identify the names of lost community members and reconstruct local history. The care and devotion Bev shows for her fellow community members is reflected in her various volunteer and committee roles. Bev is a member of the GARVOC District Residents Group, the GARVOC Cemetery Trust, a librarian at Warrnambool Family History Group, and also helped establish the GARVOC Residents Past and Present Memorial Board. Bev is an original member of the Rubber Band, a music group that has raised thousands of dollars for Southwest Healthcare at the Port Fairy Folk Festival over the past 30 years. In 1995, Bev researched the history of the Panmure Primary School for the 125th anniversary and assisted with the 150th celebrations in February 2020. Mother to 9 children, 23 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, community involvement has been a core part of Bev's life. Armed with a big heart and a willingness to roll up her sleeves and help others, Bev also assists with organising the local World Children's Hospital auction, helping to raise more than $11,000 each year for the appeal. A modest matriarch of the GARVOC community, Bev certainly doesn't do this for the praise or recognition. She simply wants to help make a difference to the lives of those around her. This devotion and compassion makes Bev a great example of what it means to be an outstanding community member and Moyne Shire Citizen of the Year for 2021. Congratulations.
Welcome everyone to GARVOC. And thank you to all the people that nominate, family and friends that did the nomination. I'm in absolute awe of your Secret Service organisation. Thank you to all the people of Moyne Shire, and thank you to the GARVOC and District Residents Incorporated. It's not very often that I get the chance to talk about the GARVOC Cemetery, so I'm not about to pass up this opportunity. Just a few random pieces of information. In 1930, the cost of a funeral from Beattie and Phillips Funeral Parlours from Warrnambool to GARVOC was £13, which is the equivalent of $26 in today's money. Advertising in the Warrnambool Standard costs an extra 4 and 6, which is 45 cents in today's money. The funeral fee included the hearse, the coffin, and the attendance at the funeral. If the funeral account was paid on the day of the funeral, you got the huge discount of the cost of the advertising was deleted. So that was an incentive to pay the account straight away. The distance from Warrnambool to GARVOC was recorded at 42 miles, which is 67.5 kilometres. And thanks to my son Steve for checking that out with Mrs. Google. And the time to travel that distance was recorded as an hour each way. So the distance has changed, and so have the roads. So there you go, that's just the difference between then and now and 1930. In June 1927, a lady aged 72 passed away, and her funeral was conducted at the GARVOC Cemetery, where 5 of her other children had already been buried. When her husband died in 1933, none of their graves were marked. All of those families' names are now recorded on our memorial wall. During our research to find the names of people buried at the GARVOC cemetery that were in unmarked graves, we had a total of 65 donated copies of death certificates. A death certificate shows where the person was buried, who the minister or priest was, who the funeral director was, the cause of death, and the mother's maiden name, any information that was available. 56 of those burials didn't list a funeral director. Instead, a friend, a neighbour, or a relative acted as funeral director. So that gives me the impression that money was very tight. Of those 56 burials, 34 were infants. And in all of those, or in most of those I should say, the father of the infant was acting funeral director, and in some cases grave digger as well. And I wouldn't have envied anyone trying to dig a grave up there in GARVOC. There's a heck of a lot of stone up there. And these deaths were mainly from the 1870s through right till the 1930s. Now, in January each year, the Warrnambool Family History Group run guided walks at the Warrnambool Cemetery. Now, these walks commemorate events in Warrnambool's history and visits graves of people who were associated with that particular event. Now, each year there is a different subject, and this year marked the centenary of the sinking of the Nestor in the Hopkins River on January the 9th, 1921. The Nestor was a motor launch that took people on river cruises. 10 people lost their lives when the Nestor sank. If you are thinking at this point of time that my train has left the station without me, rest assured it's okay, but you would be, it would be natural to wonder what on earth has that got to do with the GARVOC cemetery. It's okay, I haven't quite lost the plot. I attended the cemetery walk this year and met a friend of many years who was also doing the walk. It was an unplanned meeting and neither of us knew of the other's intention. Within a few days, that friend had occasion to visit an elderly uncle and related the story of the Nestor to him, and was somewhat startled at his reply that he was well aware of the centenary, as his mother was a passenger on the Nestor on the day of the disaster, and was fortunate to be rescued as she was unable to swim. My friend's uncle had never mentioned it to his niece ever, and when she asked why, he said, well, it happened before his parents were married, and it was known about within the family, and it was 100 years ago, so it wasn't mentioned in everyday conversation. My friend rang me then to share her story and asked for guidance to gain as much information about her great-aunt as she could. I inquired about a possible passenger list for the Nestor on the day, but was answered with a gentle no, there wasn't one. After talking further with her uncle, my friend shared what information he had with me, and I agreed to let her know if I gained any further information. Just a few days ago, I was rereading a report in the Standard, which was dated back to February 1916, about an inquiry into the suicide of a young man who was buried in an unmarked grave at the GARVOC cemetery, and whose name appears on our memorial wall at our cemetery. The Trust also hold a copy of a death certificate for this young man, which was donated quite some years ago. Imagine my surprise when my friend's great-aunt's name appeared as one of the witnesses giving evidence at that inquiry. Yeah. So it seems that this lady was employed as a cook on various properties when larger numbers of seasonal workers were employed. So from all of those chance happenings and records held by the GARVOC Cemetery Trust, some gaps in that family history have been pieced together. They now know where that lady was working at the time, who owned the property, who some of her co-workers were, and that at that time she was a single woman. A copy of the newspaper report, as well as a copy of the young man's death certificate, have been forwarded to the family concerned for them to continue their research independently. So that just shows you the value of records, even though back 100 years ago. They're still valid now. Thank you.